Hello, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We don't have folks yet. Oh, we're trickling in. Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a few moments to let the participants log on successfully. Thank you for joining us. As we get settled, this is a reminder that to keep this resource accessible, we will be recording today's webinar and uploading it to our website so that if you'd like to revisit it, you are more than welcome to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. As I said earlier, thank you so much for joining the PCF team to go over the second round of large capital projects in our ARPA Nonprofit Capital Project Fund. We're so glad that you joined us. I know that we are probably all Zoom experts by now, but just a few gentle housekeeping reminders. We are in webinar mode. That means that your mic is muted. If you have any questions, you will see the Q&A section below. Go ahead and write your questions in and we will go over them at the end. If we aren't able to give you a really precise answer right now, don't worry, we will follow up and make sure that we give you the best information available. And during the Q&A portion, we will go ahead and unmute you so that we can get into more specifics then. My name is Rose Cervantes, and I am the program officer for ARPA, and I will kick it over to my senior program officer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Howard. I'm the Senior Program Officer at PCF for our ARPA work. On to David.
Oh. Hi, everyone. David Bender, the Director of Grants and Operations here, overseeing the ARPA work and any other grant you see from us. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Hughes. I'm the Grants Manager for the ARPA programming. So excited to be helping you out.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Reed. I am helping to provide technical assistance for the ARPA project.
Awesome.
And then we also have our CEO, Duggan Cooley, who will be hopping on during the Q&A to just be a resource for us. To walk us through a little bit of our agenda today, we're going to be hitting a lot of the basic information to really set the stage to have a successful application. So we're going to go over the funding focus, remind you about the eligibility. I believe this is we need a different file, but we'll talk about eligibility, the negative economic impact. We'll talk through the geographic impact and the priorities for the funding. We will revisit what a large capital project is defined as. Then we'll jump into our grant portal to walk through the application, review the payment and decision process, and then we'll go over some important dates and TA.
So I'm going to jump in and describe a little bit about the focus of this funding. So all of you may know that PCF, in collaboration with the county, is leading granting efforts to support capital needs, and this is meant to address economic harm due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's kind of a broad umbrella guidance for your applications. Anything that you propose should offer a clear public benefit that is derived from the capital asset. And this is the final round of funding that we'll be doing for the ARPA Nonprofit Capital Project Fund.
And then to talk a little bit about eligibility criteria, this is for 501c3 public charities with tax-exempt status. We also require that your organization has been operating program for 1 year prior to the initial start of this program, which was August 8th, 2022. We must specify that capital projects must be located in Pinellas County and serving Pinellas County residents. We will dive into this a little bit more further along in our webinar, but the crux of this application has stayed the same throughout the funding rounds. We will need the organization to demonstrate an unremedied negative economic or financial impact from the pandemic that can really fluctuate between direct revenue loss from fundraisings that you weren't able to hold, or reductions in grant revenue. And then to just highlight a couple of institutions and organizations that are not eligible to apply, we have public schools, universities, hospitals, 501c3 institutions, sole nonprofits whose sole mission is to support another institution financially. So again, the organizations I just listed are not eligible for funding. And then the last note for eligibility is that if you were previously recommended for a large capital project, you will not be eligible in this round of funding. And I will kick it over to Dr. Reed.
Thank you, Rose. So as Rose mentioned, a key crux of this application is being able to demonstrate a negative economic impact. That negative economic impact must be unremedied as of this time of the application, and it has to be caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Some ways that you can demonstrate a negative financial impact are how inflationary pressures have affected your organization, showing a reduction in revenue since the onset of the pandemic, demonstrating an increase in pandemic-related revenue that is restricted. So you cannot use some funds that you've received as a part of the pandemic relief to fund the purchase of your capital asset that you're seeking through this application process. You can also demonstrate the use of reserves from pandemic-related budgeted expenses, and you need to remedy or replace those reserves as a result so that you can undertake your capital projects. You can also demonstrate that you have allocated resources to meet a pandemic-related need, to remedy an increase in demand for services, for example, from the pandemic. And so now you're unable to purchase your capital asset that you are in need of. Next slide. Can we advance to the next slide? Thank you. So another way that you can demonstrate impact is through geographic impact. So this isn't the same as negative financial impact. You still need to demonstrate a negative financial impact, but you can speak to the populations that your community or that your organization serves and demonstrate that you're serving a disproportionately impacted community. There are several ways that you can do this. Several ways that you can demonstrate impact to a disproportionately impacted communities. One of those is demonstrating that you're serving individuals who are living in a qualified census tract. QCTs, or qualified census tracts, are federally designated census tracts defined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And so they outline areas in the nation, specific to us in Pinellas County, that qualify as these QCTs, where we understand that residents living in those QCTs are disproportionately impacted in general, but they're also going to be disproportionately impacted specifically by the pandemic. So if you can demonstrate that you're serving clients in those areas, then that's one way to demonstrate geographic impact. Another way is to demonstrate that you're serving individuals or households in low and moderate income communities, or low and moderate income households. So you can use data from census data to demonstrate serving households in those communities. You can also demonstrate geographic impact by showing that you're serving households that qualify for federal assistance programs. And I shouldn't say geographic in this sense, this is specific to disproportionately impacted communities. But you can show this by showing that you're serving individuals who receive SNAP or TANF. And you also can show that you're demonstrating that you're serving persons with disabilities, persons from LGBTQ+ populations, religious minorities, communities of color, and people otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty. So all of these ways are ways that you can demonstrate disproportionately impacted communities, QTC specifically, in low and moderate household specific to geographic impact.
So this is available to all of you if you choose to use QCTs as a way to show that you're serving communities disproportionately impacted. You can put in the address of your organization, and then this tool will show kind of the outlines of regions in Pinellas that count as these areas. So again, like Dr. Reed just mentioned, there's many ways to show that you're meeting the needs of disproportionately impacted communities. This is one way, and so this is a tool that's available to you.
And when we go through the application, I'll show you where the link is for this tool. So it's linked in the application itself.
So as you're putting together applications, there are the areas that are shown on the screen will result in bonus points if you choose to apply for capital projects in areas that are under these priorities. This is based on County Commission guidelines. And if you don't offer programming in these areas, you're still eligible to apply. So we really want to emphasize that. However, you will benefit from bonus points if your organization is offering programming under these priority areas. And to read them out here, these include individuals with disabilities, food security, specialized healthcare, and under that, we are including mental health, dental care, and substance use disorders, as well as housing. So to give a reminder of what we mean when we're saying large capital projects, a good way to think about these are as items that you cannot move. So this includes modifications to property. There are some examples here on the screen, including HVAC systems, building expansions or renovations, new construction. We have resurfacing a parking lot, rewiring, new bathrooms and showers. So all these examples are things that you cannot move. And we want to remind you that the maximum request amount is $500,000. And as you're crafting your applications, proportionality to the negative economic impact that your organization experienced because of COVID is really crucial. So as you explain your negative economic impact in your application, make sure that you are requesting a capital project amount that is proportional to that impact.
And just to add a note about the things you can't move, that's kind of a shortcut. It's not like a 100% always the case. For example, a security system that you would bring with you if you left the property, that would not be included in this round. So if you have any doubts of whether it's a large project or not, please reach out before completing the application. We would hate for you to complete it and have it not be a fit for this opportunity.
And before we go into actually walking through the application, we want to remind you of a few things. All of the documents that you upload as attachments to your application will be made public. So just keep that in mind. Also, any bids and estimates that you collect for the capital purchase you're proposing have to be dated after July 5th of this year. And we are asking that if your proposal is over $75,000, that you collect 3 bids or estimates on the work. And if it's under that amount, we're asking for 2. And another reminder that because this is ARPA funding, everything has to be spent by the end of December 2026. So that's kind of the time frame for this capital project funding.
Awesome. So I'll take over now as we walk through the application. I'm going to be using an example of an organization that we made up called Better Tomorrow. There might be a Better Tomorrow out there, but we just made it up for this. Its mission is related to mental health care in Pinellas County. Their negative economic impact is that staffing costs have increased significantly due to inflation, as well as turnover has increased as well. And there's been a major increase in service demand, meaning available resources in this organization have to be directed to services and not to what they want to do, which is renovate their existing counseling center. So they're going to request $250,000 to do so. So I'm going to switch over into our grant portal now. I'm not going to walk you through how to get to the application just for time's sake. If you have difficulty with that, please reach out to us. It's pretty easy to get that sorted out. So here is the application itself. We will be posting a recording of this very webinar at the top to replace this initial text. The rubric is available. Highly, highly recommend you look at the rubric and go through each answer and check, oh, did I do it? Does it seem like I've sufficiently fulfilled the criteria laid out? And there's also a Word version available because in case you want to pass around a copy internally as a draft. Just make sure you do pay attention to character limits. So really introductory fields here, organization name, project name, actually gonna make this smaller. Your EIN and corporation year, your mission statement. This should not be long. This should be what goes on your 990. This should not be a paragraph. It should be a sentence or two. Your unique entity ID. So this is something the federal government uses. This is a combo of letters and numbers the federal government uses to identify your organization. They used to use what was called a DUNS number. They don't use that anymore. So we recommend you start now on getting a unique entity ID if you do not have it. It will not stop you from going to committee, but if you're ultimately awarded this grant and proceed to contracting, we will need it at that point. So recommend you get it now. Your annual operating budget, just for your entire organization. In some other grant opportunities, we ask about Pinellas specifically. This is your entire operating budget, entire. So no matter the service area. Amount requested. Again, the max request amount for this round is $500,000. This question, does the total project cost exceed the amount your organization is requesting? So for example, if this organization, Better Tomorrow, is requesting $250,000 through this grant, but the actual cost of the project is $500,000, they would select yes for this question. Rent versus own. Let's say Better Tomorrow rents for $1 a year. They have a long-term lease, $1 a year for 30 years, but they are responsible for all modifications. So we'll use that for this example. I click yes here. This isn't going to apply to many organizations, but if you have a parent nonprofit that has multiple subsidiaries, you have to indicate if those subsidiaries will be applying in this process. If you are concerned that you fall into this category, you can reach out. It really won't apply to many of you, but better to ask if you are concerned that it does. Request specifics. So first, those priority areas that Jocelyn mentioned that the Board of County Commissioners has set for this round are listed here: individuals with disabilities, food security, mental health, dental care, substance use disorders, and housing. Better Tomorrow offers counseling, so they would select yes for this. So they fit into that priority area. Programming background. So you describe here what your organization does and how long it's been doing it. If you've said you fit into the priority area, make sure you are very clear on how. You know, with Better Tomorrow describing counseling, it might be a little apparent, but we know some organizations do a lot of things. And so if the capital project is going to be related to, if the capital project is going to be related to a program that falls in this focus area, describe so there. Community needs. So this is where you would cite data that supports the work that you're doing. So here, Better Tomorrow would describe mental health statistics, which, as we know, are pretty dire right now. So they would cite a piece of local data. The more local, the better, but sometimes we understand there might be regional data or even state or national data based upon your programming area, but be as local as you can get. Negative economic impact. As we've said, this is the crux of your application. This is what allows PCF to fund you in the first place, if you get that far in the process. This is where you would describe what that negative economic impact has been. The more numbers, the better. The more you can indicate either lost revenue, and in the next, where there's uploads, you could upload a canceled fundraiser and how much funding you estimated you lost based on that cancellation, or service increase. So you're seeing X number more clients and we can't purchase the capital assets because of that. Next is pandemic relief funding. So any relief funding you have gotten since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020. So this could be the PPP loans, CBDG money. PCF ran the Pinellas Cares Nonprofit Partnership Fund. If you got funding there, you would describe it here. You also have to describe why that did not solve the negative economic impact you suffered. For example, maybe you got Pinellas Cares money, but it expired. So it helped you meet the demand then, it's not helping now. If you've gotten nothing, you can just say no pandemic relief funding received. Proposal description. So this is what you say, what the project you're doing actually is. What is it? What's the lifespan of the property improvement? So for example, if Better Tomorrow thinks these renovations are going to help them for 15 years, say that here very specifically. And how does it address the negative economic harm you described in the previous question? Better Tomorrow has seen a huge increase in services, so they want to add 2 counseling rooms. It not only addresses the fact that Better Tomorrow doesn't have the funds to do that, renovation and expansion, but it also addresses it allows them to serve more people, which is what caused the negative economic harm in the first place. So if you can link those two really close together, you will be more successful. How many people will benefit from this capital purchase annually? And then you indicate whether that is unduplicated or duplicated, or maybe another way of determining it, which you can describe. And then how does this project continue to long-term sustainability for your organization? So what will it do over the long term? Better Tomorrow can explain it will allow us to use this building longer. We're responsible for modifying it, and it allows us to serve more clients. And another thing that just occurred to me, at a lower cost, because we don't have to move to a bigger space, we can stay in the space we're in. So that allows us to sustain ourselves longer. So now specifics about the project itself. Permitting. We'd like to know any permits you need to pull to do this project successfully and legally. And if you say whether they've been obtained, they're in progress, or that timeline to get them. A plan set. So this will most likely be for much bigger scale projects, perhaps not in the dollar range that this round is offering, but we still ask, is there a plan set? If so, you press yes and upload it. If you have trouble with file sizes, reach out to Rose and we'll get a Dropbox link or some other way to make sure that that material makes it to the committee. Timeline. This is really important. We want to know that you've thought out kind of milestones for this project, how long it's going to take, and how you developed it. So hopefully it's not just a couple staff members just getting together and thinking it'll take 3 months. Hopefully you've talked with people, and as you're obtaining bids, you've gotten an estimated timeline. Include the permitting, include every phase of the project. Team leadership. So who's going to oversee this? How are they related to the organization? Maybe you're contracting a project manager. Maybe someone inside the organization is going to be monitoring it. And then also indicate if they've overseen similar projects. Cost difference. So this is when I indicated that Better Tomorrow's renovation actually is $500,000. So I would enter here $500,000 is the total project cost. Again, even though they're only requesting $250,000 through this grant. You then explain how is the organization going to cover the rest? Maybe private donors, you know, a variety of examples, a variety of possibilities. You would explain there. And then what Dr. Reed was talking about in terms of priority populations and geographic impact. We list out those categories again of low and moderate income households, federal assistance programs, historically marginalized communities, and QCT located projects. You would describe how they'll benefit from this capital project. And then you'd also give your headquarters location and the project location. So this should be your official headquarters as registered with the state of Florida, and then where the actual property that you're modifying is. Rented. So when I talked about that $1 lease for 30 years, you have to explain here why you're responsible. So I would say Better Tomorrow has this nearly free lease, and we are responsible for our property modifications. Then you have to list the landlord and upload your current lease. Community connection. So this is where we want to get to. How do you represent the community that you're serving? So you would describe maybe you have a community advisory council where former clients of yours help inform the future of your programming and help it evolve and develop. Maybe you have long-term volunteers that have lived experience maybe with mental health or you know, being in poverty. You would put that here. And then we have board and leadership demographics. We just want to know about the identities of that your board and executive leadership team identify as. And then going into the financial interview, bids and estimates. So as Jocelyn mentioned, bids have to be dated July 5th or later. Please make sure there's a date. There's that framework of if it's less than $75,000, you must get 2. If it's equal to or more than $75,000, you must upload 3. If you've already selected a contractor, maybe you're deep in this already and you're looking for a phase for the ARPA Nonprofit Capital Project Fund to cover, you would explain how that contractor was selected. If there was not a competitive bidding process used, or there was not a formal kind of procurement where you compared costs, it will lose points. We'd also like to know if it's a minority or woman-owned business. The federal government generally wants organizations to use minority or women-owned businesses. And then related parties. So we define a related party as someone that is involved with your organization and could potentially be involved in this project in the financial sense. So if a board member that has a contracting company provides a bid, we want to know that here. This is not disqualifying, but just to avoid conflicts of interest and being able to cure any conflicts of interest in the future if they arise, we'd like you to describe those related parties here if they apply. Budget details. So we would like to see a budget for the large project. 2 big things. Please ensure there are 10 to 20% for contingencies. So that amount requested that you put at the very top of the application should include contingencies. And the $500,000 limit for your request includes that 10 to 20% contingencies. So please keep that in mind. If this is construction, also include performance and payment bonds. We are allowing an indirect cost of up to 5%. So make sure that is represented in your budget. We are not prescribing a template because of the variety of projects that are going to be proposed. There was no way to create one template. However, we did provide an example one that you are free to use. Other funding sources. So have you gotten any other funding for this? You would list it here. And if you haven't pursued any additional funding sources, explain why. Changes in operating costs. So we'd like to know if this increases ongoing operating costs, how will you compensate for the difference? Something that's really been emphasized to PCF is that after this funding, there will be no operational funding to support the capital project once it's put into use. So Once Better Tomorrow puts those 2 additional counseling rooms into use, and there is maybe higher HVAC bills or air conditioning electricity bills. I would describe how we're going to cover that here. If it decreases, maybe you're looking for energy efficiency modifications to the property, and it's going to lower your ongoing operating costs. You would specify that here as well. And if it doesn't affect them, specify that. So fund management capacity. We'd like to know, these are federal funds, meaning that you will have to document, if you were ultimately awarded this grant, you will have to document every expense and submit that to PCF. So we would like to know, do you have an accounting software that can track a general ledger and multiple accounts? And can you work on a reimbursement basis for this grant? So are you able to put up funds first and then have PCF reimburse you after you submit an invoice? Not being able to handle a reimbursement grant does not disqualify you. It simply informs us on how we approach contracting with you and payments. So we just want to know that here. Corrective and investigative action. So because these can be pretty significant grants, we'd like to know if your organization has had any issues with previous funding. So have you been under a legal investigation by a local, state, or federal institution? Have you been placed on a corrective action plan by a funder? Or have you had grant funding flat out recalled in the past 3 years? Again, this is not disqualifying. Maybe there was a legal investigation that ended up being absolutely nothing. Say that here and be very clear in that. Documentation. So we'd like your most recent board-approved organizational budget for the fiscal year you're in. It can be in the format that your board approved it in. Board of directors list, no template, just a current list of board of directors. Your most recent 990. If you file a postcard Hopefully you saved your receipt. If you did not, explain that in this box. And then your most recent financial statements. If they're audited, make sure you upload the most recently audited financial statements. If you don't have an audit, explain why. That's not, again, one of those questions. It is not disqualifying, but we'd like to know. We know a lot of smaller organizations don't have the funding or requirement to get an audit. That's okay. Explain it. Insurance. So there will be different insurance requirements based upon the project complexity and project timeline that we have. We'd like to know what insurance coverage do you already have? And then you will be required, if awarded, to list us as additional insured on your general liability insurance. Then you agree, as I mentioned, to submit monthly expenditure reports related to the to your award if you do receive a contract from this fund, and there will be a final report to submit at the end demonstrating the impact of this funding. And this last part, there's an additional upload. You can upload anything under 10 megabytes and any kind of narrative that you would like to share. And that is the application. So Rose, if you want to take on over.
Can't hear you, Rose. You're
Hi,
muted.
hello, thank you. So thank you, David, for walking through the application. We're gonna pick up now with the payment schedules. So this is, I know that says prepayments, but really we want to emphasize that this is a reimbursement basis grant, and that depending on each organization that is selected for award and their schedule and the complexity of their project, PCF will work with you to establish the most appropriate payment schedule. And to talk a little bit more about the decision process, we do have an external committee that reviews applications during a committee that will be broadcast publicly on Zoom. Then those recommendations are sent to the county commission for final decision. If you have any questions or want to communicate about about the scoring of these applications, we ask that you do reach out to committee members and direct all questions to the PCF staff. And then once the commission finalizes their decisions, we will begin the contracting process. And then if you'd like to see a full timeline on how that decision process looks, you can check out our webpage. And as you know, these are the upcoming dates, and we are currently in the application period, which opened on July 31st. And the deadline for this proposal will be September 22nd. We have the committee review meeting scheduled in the month of October, and then our final approval by the Pinellas Board of County Commissioners is to be determined, and we will let you know as soon as that date gets scheduled. And now we'd like to highlight and offer additional technical assistance throughout the application period. We have already scheduled 2 virtual opportunities, one on August 29th, so this month from 11 to 1 p.m. And our second opportunity will be September 13th, also from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. In addition to virtual, we do have the opportunity to request in-person assistance. So you can go to our website and find the form. If you scroll down to the bottom, and then you can let us know if you are good with virtual or in person, and then we'll take that question, route it to the best person on the staff, and get you what you need. We have a wonderful team working on the ARPA program to assist you throughout the application period. You met Dr. Reed. We also have Nikki Gaskin Capehart, Jocelyn Rose, and David. Myself, I talked about myself in the third person. Now we will happily open up the discussion for questions.
So we have a few here in the Q&A. I'm going to maybe go simplest to more complex. So Melody asked, what is covered in the technical assistance meetings? What these are meant for is for our staff to provide you with personalized feedback or question answering for your proposals. So it is the best use of your time if you've already sat down with the grant application and worked through it, and you're bringing us something to respond to. So this is really what the technical assistance meetings are meant for. We also have a question from Patsy. Do you need to own the building in order to qualify for capital funding? Their facility is leased. David, do you want to take that one?
Sure. No, you don't need to own the building. However, as I talked about in the application, which I know this was asked before I went over it. If you're renting the building, or leasing, you need to explain why you're responsible for the modifications. And you need to upload your lease.
Okay. Melody also submitted a question about the requirement for bids. So she asked when, I'm going to digest this for a second and make sure I'm reading it back correctly. So if you're asking for capital projects that contain multiple items and require different bids, does each specific project, such as painting versus ceiling work, each require multiple bids? This may be one, yeah.
I'm happy to try and answer that, Jocelyn. I think the easiest thing to do would be to try and group them as projects and see if there's a contractor or somebody who can put a package together to address the totality of what you're looking for, or large groups of what you're looking for. And then once they're grouped together, sort of look at, are you above or below that $75,000 threshold? If they're all separate and you're going to look at them separate and they're sizable items, then you're going to need to get bids on each of them. So I'd try and figure out the most expeditious way to get all that sort of packaged together and get multiple groups to bid on the totality of work that needs to be accomplished.
So going down the list here, Carolyn had a question about a project, and it sounds like the bidding process is scheduled to happen sometime in October. So Carolyn's wondering, how to proceed given that they may not have bids for this application. I'm going to say this with a grain of salt, that this may be a good question for technical assistance for us, or for maybe some more one-on-one conversation. However, we do need expert provided bids for this application. And that's because we have to somehow have substantiation for the budget request for the amount of money that you're asking for. So Duggan or David or Rose, I would just pass it on if you have any extra thoughts around Carolyn's question.
We can talk more specifically offline about how you can go about determining the cost, or what they will be estimated to be. I would say don't drop out today, but we definitely would want to talk this through with you.
Okay. Another question here is, if you're the subsidiary of a government, can you qualify?
I don't. If you're able to talk, we can unmute you. Maybe you can give a better description. Government institutions are typically excluded, but some government institutions are 501c3s run programming. If you want to unmute and.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. No, we are like a quasi-governmental, and our RISE Corporation is a 501c3, but it's like a component unit of, it's the Housing Authority. So it's a component unit of the Housing Authority. And we have a very large capital project, and I have bids. I have all the things I need. I'm just not, I just want to make sure before I go through and take the time to complete the application, etc., that, that it's going to be eligible. But it's absolutely a 501c3 though, but it doesn't have to file 990s. We got a decision from the IRS that said, I mean, I can submit that where I can show that I do not have to file 990s for that particular corporation. And I have, so
think, David, it might be one that we've got to dig into a bit, because I think
Yeah.
the question will also rest with who will be the ultimate owner of the
So-
improved property.
The owner currently would be the housing authority, but we're going to do like some new market tax credits. So the ownership structure is going to change slightly.
Okay.
And this particular 501c3 is in the ownership structure. They won't be, because of the way the new market tax credits fall, they'll be like the entity that puts all the money in, and then it'll flow down to the housing authority, and it will be the entities, I guess, that put the money in. It will flow down to another 501c3 that we have yet to make.
Okay. I think we might just have to unpack that a little bit with you very specifically to see
Okay.
how that might exactly come together.
Love to, because I'm housing.
Yes,
Yeah.
So, I
for
mean,
sure. Thank you.
yes.
Okay, so Hillary asked, are we allowed to submit the proposal we prepared under the previous effort last year? The answer is yes, with some caveats that the request limit is different and the application also is slightly different. So this is another, example of a time when maybe one-on-one TA would be helpful, especially if you have questions on strengthening your application from last year. But I do just want to flag that this is a different request limit, and some things in the application have also shifted. Okay, another question we have here. Could furniture, fixtures, and equipment be considered if they're fixed to the building? It could still be moved, but it would have to be unfixed first.
I mean, maybe to be more specific about what you're thinking there. And Helena, if you're here, just raise your hand and we can unmute you, and maybe you can be more specific about what you're thinking, like actual specific items. Go ahead, you're unmuted.
Hi, thank you for considering my question. So specifically the furniture for the new children's crisis stabilization unit, which will be fixed to the floor. So it will not be able to be moved unless, I don't know, something happens and we have to move the building. But otherwise it's not going to be free. It's not going to be easily movable. It's going to be fixed on all four sides. So would that be considered under this grant? I do know if it's movable, you don't allow it, but in this case, it's a little more specific because we are fixing all of the furniture to the ground. But
We'd want to see, is that the only thing you'd be requesting? Or would you be requesting other, like maybe construction costs or other?
well, we ran into a problem with asking for specific construction costs because we have applied for one, or will be applying for one permit under the current architect. So we would actually have to then have, go through the whole procedure with you, go through the public bidding process and choose another architect then for that specific part of the grant. So that's why we were hoping that maybe we could apply to the FF&E.
Yeah.
Do not have to exclude one specific part and then do that separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of if we would have an exclusion to who you were working with to begin with, if that was, if they were putting together quotes and bids for the entire project, of which this would be a part. I mean, I think from our perspective, as long as you've gone through a process to select
Okay.
them, we're not going to have a major issue with that. We've got some projects that in a prior round were already under construction, and this was to help with continued construction. And so those organizations had already gone through a procurement process. They explained that they did not have to go through that all over again for this part, but whatever this would be funding would have had to have been considered under that bid, like your bidding process from before.
I think that would work. I mean, we're working with Soffarelli Architects. We did go to a pretty rigorous bidding process. We did have 3 bids. So I can certainly show you the process that we have worked with.
Yeah, because I would say the construction costs and things like that are going to be the most clear in this process and are probably not going to get questioned much. You know, but things that are affixed that typically aren't affixed to the building might generate more questions. So I think we could work with you directly to figure out if the process you went through to select the architect meets the needs for this project, so you don't have to do that all over again. I think we could go over that with you and just make sure.
Right. Thank you very much.
You're
I'll
welcome.
get in touch with you. Thank you.
We have a question from Jenny wondering if there are waivers for bids if contractors are frequent no-shows despite best efforts. We may only get 1 to 2 for each renovation in a large project.
Yeah, this is not an uncommon occurrence. I think do your best to get 3 bids or 2 bids, whatever is required, but clearly document the process you went through. We called 6, only got calls back from 2, only 2 showed up, or, you know, 3 of them set appointments and only 2 showed up. But I think to outline a very clear process that you went through in every attempt to meet the requirements, and it wasn't your fault that people didn't show up. And we've seen this happen before. Some of it's just based on the size and volume of the project may not be of interest to certain firms. But do everything you can to meet the requirements, but certainly document everything. So if you get into a position like this, you can defend the fact that you might not have gotten exactly what was required, but you made every effort to do so.
So we don't have any more open questions. I don't see any hands raised.
I think we're good.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and please reach out. We look forward to helping you through the second round of the large capital projects during the application period. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks, everyone.